Good afternoon. I am going to call our regular council meeting of Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 to order. Welcome to all those joining us online. We have an agenda in front of us. Mr. Coleman, do we have any additions or deletions?
Nothing from administration, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Looking for someone to move the agenda as presented. Councillor Wanchuk. Comments or questions? All in favor? Thank you. We have minutes of our previous meeting of March 28th, 2023. Looking for someone to move those. Councillor Lewis will move those. Any comments, questions, errors, omissions? I'm seeing no hands. All in favor? That is unanimous. We have an opportunity at the beginning of every meeting for anybody who would like to present to council on a topic not on the agenda can do so now. Calling a second time. And a third time. Thank you. Moving on to staff introductions, Mr. Honesty and Ms. Weiss. We'll start with you, Mr. Honesty.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Vicki Fulton, who has recently started as our new administrative assistant in Parks and Recreation. Vicki joins our team as previously worked for the city of Maple Ridge in their Parks and Recreation department. So we're excited to have her join our team and bring the knowledge she has from the city of Maple Ridge and transition to our beautiful Alberta climate, which she's getting the full experience of. So thank you. And I'd like to welcome Vicki to our team.
Congratulations. Thank you. And we'll see you in Parks and Rec for November 8th. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. I get the pleasure of introducing to you Miss Jillian Huff. She is our new payroll administrator and she started with us on Tuesday of last week. And so she comes to us from the county of Vermilion River, where she was doing payroll and benefits there as well. We're very happy to have her on board. And
come on, congratulations and welcome. Welcome to both of you. Wishing you a very long career here in Leduc County. And speaking about long careers, Ms. Klobosco, the floor is yours for our year-end financial reports.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. This afternoon, we have a report in front of you regarding our 2022 year-end financial reports. So the recommendation to be considered today is the approval of the 2022 audited financial statements, as well as the 2022 accumulated surplus schedule. We do have Mr. Curtis Friesen from Metrics Group with us this afternoon to do a presentation on our financial statements. So I will turn it over to Mr. Friesen to do his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just here to say a few words about the audit, the financial statements. So we completed the audit a few weeks ago, provided draft financial statements to management at that point. So they've had a chance to look over them. They're here, like Renee said, for your consideration for approval today. So the audit itself, just to make a few comments about that, went smoothly. Obviously, as we come in every year, once again, right, we want to check how the processes and procedures in terms of how you account for your different sources of revenue, expenses, payroll, how all that was done again in 2022. So the results of our audit work was clean, no concerns or issues to bring to council's attention. So very comfortable with how you guys are going about doing your day-to-day accounting. So our audit report is near the front. You'll see it shortly after the cover there. So it's a standard worded audit report. In the first paragraph is where we give our opinion that based on the work we did, we're comfortable signing off on the financial statements, saying that they're a fair and reasonable representation of what happened at the county in 2022. So that is the audit side of things. I just have a few comments on some of the main pages of the financial statements. First page we're looking at is the statement of financial position. There we go. So top of the page, Cash in the bank, just over 33 million. A drop from last year's 41, but if you look a few lines down, you'll see investments went up from 31 to 41, right? So when you look at those numbers in total, about a couple $1 million higher than the year before. So clearly you're in a good position in terms of cash and investments. The other items in the financial asset area there, so you see taxes receivable 1.6, accounts receivable, big number, 12.6 million. Most of that is grant revenue that is coming at some point from the province. Almost 10 million of that 12 is grants. So other than that, you got the local improvement receivables being paid down as required from 4.9 down to about 4 million. Annexation proceeds receivable from the city of Edmonton. So again, they made their regular payments, so 3.7 down to 3.1. Debt charges recoverable, that's the amount with Leduc Regional Housing Foundation. So they, again, making payments. So really that's the comment, right? The receivables are being collected as we would expect. We didn't see any issues out of the ordinary in there. So 97 million total financial assets, financial liabilities. Below that, the two larger numbers near the bottom of that list. So deferred revenue, those are grants that have been received or offsite levies that have been received and have not yet been spent in accordance with what they relate to. So that's why they sit there as deferred. And then the line below it is your long-term debt. So no new debt taken out in 2022 and your balance went down from 40 down to 37. So made all the regular repayments, about $3 million of debt repayment. Assets less liabilities leaves you with your net financial assets. So again, it's a financial indicator of where things stand at the county. And clearly when you see that number increase over last year and you know, net financial asset, you're clearly in a healthy position. After the financial assets, a couple more categories there. Your what are called your non-financial. So again, this is tangible capital assets is your, you know, your net investment in infrastructure, land, buildings, roads, bridges, those types of things. That's the book value of what you spent less what's been amortized. Last year's number, we ended off at 340 million. This year up to 348. So you did actually add about 24 million in new capital additions. Nisku Spine Road was the single biggest item in there. And then every year we're amortizing. So, you know, you added 24, but we amortized out 17. So net increase of about 7 million to your book value. A little bit of inventory, some prepaid expenses on hand. Total assets, 349 million. You add that to your financial assets and you got what's called your accumulated surplus, 373 million. So about almost $10 million increase over last year.
Could you please explain what a consumable inventory is?
Gravel is in there.
Okay.
Things that you will use, culverts, grader blades, those types of things.
Thank you.
So we'll take a look at the accumulated surplus in a note in a little bit, but 373. So that's kind of your snapshot of where things stood at the county. Like I said, healthy financial position. Just make a couple of comments here on the next page as well. Your statement of operations. So here we're looking more at what actually happened in 2022. You got your revenues. So middle column is the actual revenue comparing to last year and to your budget. Top of the list, net municipal taxes up to 46.7 million. So right in line with what you had budgeted, what you had planned, with a 3% increase over last year's number. Sale and user fees, most of that 7.4 million is your water, wastewater fees. It's about 6 million of that 7.4. So there was an increase in water consumption and increase in rates. So that's the main reason sale and user fees are up over last year's number and over budget. Government transfers are operating, so up to just over $3 million increase over last year. You did get a Western Diversification Grant of just over 500,000 was spent for operating purposes. So that's why that number is up a little bit over last year. Licenses, permits. So there was again a little bit more building development activity. So 1.9 million in revenue generated there. A couple lines down, we got the other income. The biggest item in there is your wastewater and wastewater service fee agreement with the airport, Edmonton International Airport. 2021 was a partial year of that. 2022 is a full year of that agreement being in place. So that's what's generating that other income. Investment income is up, so rates obviously increased towards the last part of 2022. So the investments that you had generated some more income there. Other smaller items listed, total revenue just over 65 million. And then we get into the expenses. Public Works is the first item, so a big number there, just over $30 million, higher than budget, higher than last year. Your gravel hauling and your fuel related costs increased, so that's the main, if you wanted to point to one reason, that's why it's up over last year. Next item, transit, big increase there as well, and that's primarily the county's contribution to the Smart Bus program cost. So that's the main reason that's up to 1.5. Going down the list, I mean, if you down a ways to enforcement, the 1.9 million, so your police funding is obviously, you're paying that in accordance with the province agreement. So that's why that's up over last year's number. Going down the list, water, like I said, consumption and price increases pushed that number to 3.8 million, so higher than budget, higher than last year, but that's why it's up. And then your wastewater payments to the wastewater commission that you're a part of, they are based on water consumption, so that's why that is higher as well. So a few other items listed there. We get into planning, and the tax share agreement is the last item on the list. Total expenses, 74.7 million. Puts you in a $9.7 million deficit at this point in the statement of operations. We always got to remember that in that $74 million expense is 17 million of amortization, right? So that is not a cash cost to the county. But again, we're just recognizing that all of your equipment and infrastructure has been used for another year, and that's why that accounting expense gets included in the 74 million. Next page just kind of finishes off the statement. So like I said, deficit of 9.7 for accounting purposes, but then we add in your capital grants. So you did recognize just over 18.8 million to help fund the different capital projects that you did have. Nisku Spine Road, again, being a big component of that. Some contributed assets, sold some equipment, had a small loss. So those items get added in there at the end, and then that turns things into a surplus, 9.7 million for accounting purposes. So that's your statement of operations. Those are in my opinion, the main 2 pages of your financial statement. There are a variety of other schedules and notes. There was no accounting changes that impacted municipalities or the county. So you'll see those, as we scroll through it, those accounting policies are the same as prior years. Maybe I will make a comment all the way to note 12. Said I would talk a little bit about accumulated surplus. So we talked about that total accumulated surplus, 373 million. So here's where it gets broken down into a few different categories, and the ones that I believe are most interested in are the operating capital reserves. So you see those numbers there, 26 million, 22 million for capital. If you add those top 3 numbers together, you got about $50 million in reserves compared to last year's 49.1. So you did end up adding about a net 900,000 to reserves. So sometimes people, when people talk about surpluses or what's this and what's that, sometimes I actually just go straight to this note and see, well, what did we do with our reserves? Did we add to them or did we subtract from them? And I think that's kind of your best indication in a simple note in terms of what you did, right? In terms of improving your reserve position.
Councillor Lewis has a question.
Thank you. Page 8 of your report for the statement of cash flows under accounts receivable, there's a big difference from 2021 to 2022. Can you explain those numbers? And then even the deferred revenue?
Page 8, yeah. So basically what this page, statement of cash flows, is basically trying to prove the cash balance from last year to this year, like what happened to either decrease or improve your cash flow. So what that number means, the 3 million, is that you collected last year, you had a receivable number at the year end, you collected 3 million of it more than where you ended up this year. So it improved your cash flow. So I think the main item was there was less. If we look at the accounts receivable note number 3, less government grants is really the single item that changed, right? Because last year at this time we had 12.5 or 12.4 million in grant receivables, now down to 9.5. So collected some grants, improving the cash flow. And then the other one you mentioned was
The deferred revenue.
deferred revenue. again, a similar concept. So deferred revenue note, we have that on there. Note number 9. So here, again, we're looking at the 2021 column. So we see all the different types of grants we're tracking and the different offsite levies. So 2021 said, hey, we had 23.5 million in deferred revenue. So funds received that we haven't spent. You see the ins, you see the outs, at the end of the year, 23.3 million in deferred. So that the item that hits your cash flow statement is the difference between those two numbers, the 200 and some thousand.
Okay. Any further questions? Go ahead, Councilor Verdi.
On the statement of operations, can you please clarify this item, government transfers for capital? Because without that value, it looks like we're operating at about a $10 million loss.
That's right. The capital grants are shown here because the statement of operations is exactly like it says, right? We're trying to demonstrate what does regular operations at Leduc County look like, right? So that's what brings us to the deficit of 9.7. But like I said, the operating expenses include amortization, right? So amortization is not cash. It's done to demonstrate, is the county generating enough revenue to pay its bills and also to build up surpluses to replace its capital, right? So the reason that capital grants comes in below is it's kind of, it isn't, the cash was recognized, but it relates to capital purchases only, not operating. So that's why it's down below.
Okay, supplemental, go ahead.
So is that healthy? Is that good? So for example, without that 18 million, like, I'm not sure if that's guaranteed to us or I'm just trying to clarify if we are safe without that 18 million, or is that 18 million guaranteed to us?
Well, the county, as every municipality, has a fixed amount of, MSI capital funding that it does get from the province on an annual basis. We're recognizing the 18.8 because you did spend it on eligible projects, right? So that's why it's showing there. And certainly when we look at your statement of operations, you had a good year of operations, right? There's no concerns in there. Yeah.
Councilor Lewis, did you have
Yes, thank you. If you go back to page 2 of your original letter, apologies for going back. The middle of the page talks about significant difficulties encountered during the audit, that there were none. What would a difficulty be?
On occasion, I guess, the auditor and management can have significant disagreements on accounting treatment of things. I have suggested entries to people and they have said absolutely not. Things like that can happen in audits. And certainly if there was something that we thought was kind of hindering us and able to complete the audit, that's where we would mention something, something like,
Thank you.
yeah, but yeah, no concerns of that nature for sure.
On that same page, it talks about allowance for doubtful accounts. What's the definition of a doubtful account?
So again, here we're thinking about receivables and will we collect it or not, right?
This is
So
a percentage that we thought we might not be able to get, and we would have to write off.
that's right. Let's take a look at that receivable note. So then you can see what management has set up for allowances. So we're looking at note number 2. So that top part is specifically for tax receivables, right? So you have current taxes owing to you, not concerned, right? I mean, typically, historically, those people pay arrears. There are, the antenna goes up and you think, well, can we collect from these people? Do we have an asset that we can take over or not? So total receivables, just over 2 million. The allowance on the books for things that we think may not be collectible, 445, right? Doesn't mean that we're not trying to collect them. Absolutely, we're going for it. So that's the specifically the tax receivable. And then down below, again, we have the other receivables, government grants, trade receivables, GST, those types of things. And in that list, we're saying 118 is fairly, is older than a year. Might be some challenges, right? Collecting. So in terms of the scope of your operations, those are, smaller numbers, but.
Ms. Weiss?
can probably help a little bit here too. For the taxes and the accounts receivable and utilities, they each have slightly different calculations. So it's not just a set percentage. Based on kind of the conditions, we look at it each year and do an analysis and say, does this make sense? Should we change this calculation? We are quite, our allowance on doubtful accounts for taxes is probably more than it needs to be, but given the current economic conditions and what we're coming out of over the last few years, that's why we made that choice.
Thank you. So it's past experience and economic situation. All right.
Yeah, there's a few other schedules at the back of the statement. Maybe one that's I always think is worth looking at is it's called expenses by object. So I spent most of the time talking, expenses by department or function. So in this one, it just splits up the same expenses in a different way, salaries, wages and benefits all in one spot, amortization. Anytime you're hiring a contractor or a service, it just gives you an idea of a different way, a look at how you're spending your money. So I always just think that's worth noting that it's there for information. So those are our comments on the financials and our report.
Thank you very much for the report. Any further questions? So the audit went smoothly. We were cooperative. There was no missing information. All of that was good. And the numbers balanced and the county's in fair financial situation at this time.
Yes.
Good news. All right, if there's no further questions, looking for someone to move the recommendation that we approve the following 2022 financial year-end documentation, the 2022 audited financial statements, and the 2022 accumulated surplus schedule. Councillor Verdi will put his name to that. Thank you very much. Any further questions? I am seeing none. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you again for your work. Thank you to our financial department for your cooperation with our auditor and ensuring that he had everything that he needed to audit our books. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And we are moving on to 5B1, which is our bylaw, debenture borrowing for the reconstruction of Township 510 from Nisku Spine Road to Range Road 243. Ms. Weiss, is this yours?
It is mine, yes. So good afternoon. As Mayor DeBlanco mentioned, I am here for the second and the third reading of the borrowing bylaw for the reconstruction of Township Road 510 from Nisku Spine Road to Range Road 243. So back on March 14th, we did bring the first reading, which was passed on March 14th, and then we advertised for 2 consecutive weeks on March 17th as well as the 24th, where we received no petitions or any reason not to go ahead. So now today, upon review, today I am bringing second reading and third reading. With the second reading, however, we would like to do a little bit of an amendment, which includes, oops, wrong button, which includes what the future funding will be. So we're looking for a reading, second reading that will include bullet number 4, which is Leduc County shall utilize offsite levies to pay the indebtedness. However, in the event of any deficiency, Leduc County will raise in each year the municipal taxes sufficient to pay the annual debenture payments. So just a little bit of a change from that first reading and what council saw back in March.
May I ask why we're making the addendum?
It was something that was missed in
Thank
first
you.
reading.
So again, standard wording, for lack of a better term,
Yes,
just was missed, and now we can clarify it and put it into second reading.
yes,
Thank you.
exactly.
All right. If there's no questions, I would be looking for someone to move. Oh, I have a question from Mr. Coleman.
Just some advice, Madam Chair. Procedurally, council should pass the resolution for the amendment. So that's the first bullet, that council authorizes the amendment as it's worded.
Thank you.
And then if council agrees to that amendment, then you can proceed with second reading of the bylaw as amended.
Okay, perfect. So Councillor Smith?
I would be the first recommendation.
Okay. That council authorized the amendment of bylaws 0623 to include, quote, Leduc County shall utilize offsite levies to pay the indebtedness. However, in the event of any deficiency, Leduc County will raise in each year the municipal taxes sufficient to pay the annual debenture payments. Okay, thank you. No hands up for questions or debate. All in favor? It's unanimous. So we will look for someone to give second reading of bylaw 0623 as amended. Councillor Balazar. Thank you. Comments or questions? All in favor? It's unanimous. And before we looking for someone to move third reading. Oh, Councillor Wanchuk. Thank you. And again, we see this as being a really critical road, not only for our residential traffic, but really as a way to connect a safe road connection into our employment area of Nisku. So really critical for our investment readiness. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And you have one more, Ms. Weiss?
I do. So my last recommendation for the day, we received a request from a ratepayer on March 9th, and they are requesting that we waive property taxes on tax roll 6600380. The background just basically explains what her letter says. And our recommendation is that Leduc County Council deny the request to cancel the $6,515.95 of tax penalties on roll number 6600380. And that's to adhere to the penalties on current and arrears of property tax bylaw 0121.
Thank you very much. I know we have a payment plan for taxes. Do we have a payment plan for tax penalties like this when they're behind? Or would we enter into something if a resident said they were unable to come up with the full amount? Would we work with them to find a way to get them back on their feet, so to speak?
Yes, absolutely. We try anything within the MGA as well as our own abilities to make sure that we can assist these individuals.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Lewis?
And all those efforts were made with this individual?
Yes, she actually went through to our FCSS department and they attempted any sort of grants that could have helped. And unfortunately, there was just none available. So she thought it was worth writing a letter.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Well, I'm going to put my name to the motion that we deny the request to cancel $6,515.95 of tax penalties on roll 6600380. I'm going to assume that this has been a long time of tax penalties. We have had lots of requests for these, and unless there's been like a fire or the building doesn't stand or someone is, we just don't approve them. So unfortunately, I can't approve the cancellation of them, but hope that our administration continues to work with the individual to find a way to pay those back. Thank you. Comments, questions, debate? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. It's never easy denying someone when you can see that they're in hard times. But we all have a responsibility to pay our taxes, and this is no different. So I will support your motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to call the question on the motion to deny. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Weiss, and please continue your efforts with the individual.
Will do. Thank you.
5C1 is our economic development presentation, and I have Mr. Murray and Mr. White listed here, but I just see Mr. Murray, so come on up. You might be alone here. Not that that's a problem. No, it is not. Welcome back. Glad to have you back here.
Sitting here with all my friends.
Yes, we are a little bit early, so that might be why. And so it's just a little bit on Leduc County's investment strategy, which we have been working on and towards creating an actual strategy. So the floor is yours when you're ready, sir.
Thanks very much. Good to see everybody, as always, including a new counselor that I haven't had the opportunity to meet. Pleasure to meet you. So the council has seen the investment attraction strategy that we've been working on for the better part of a year now. I think we've had 2 touch points leading up to this conversation today. We are already tracking in the right direction based on council's direction from the last couple of conversations around where this will actually take us. The purpose, of course, and just to remind council, stems from the fact that Leduc County has not had a unique economic development strategy up to this point. By virtue of the county's ongoing development, as well as the vision put forward by council in the strategic plan. The goal was to create an investment attraction strategy that was going to be able to capitalize on what we know the competitive advantage that the county has, as well as be able to create a more competitive environment internally to try to attract and grow business for the county. This strategy achieves those pieces, I think, through a few different means. First of all, it's creating a more competitive internal policy environment, which is something the council has already been prioritizing and working through, and knowing that there's been significant strides made in that area. Making sure that, frankly, Dwayne is also in his ongoing day-to-day administration, keeping innovation, entrepreneurialism, and economic development at the forefront of all staff, and the culture that is being built here within the county, within that staff piece. Of course, on the investment attraction piece, what we're looking to do here through this strategy is really dovetail onto the efforts that are made through the partner organizations that you already are part of, most importantly, Edmonton Global. So this strategy dovetails and aligns and complements Edmonton Global's regional strategy. It is not a duplication and it is not divergent from it. And that seeks for us to be able to push forward on creating the conditions for success on attracting new business to the county. We've already started to see pickup around those lines. We also know that we're dealing with a really competitive region. And we've seen other counties in particular up their game. And so this is an effort to be able to identify where we believe those competitive advantages exist, the sectors that empirically we know that we have an existing competitive advantage, and that we are going to be able to grow that competitive advantage to be able to move things forward. And of course, as well, partner with organizations like the airport and make sure that we are leveraging one another's collective strengths in being able to seek opportunities for expansion and investment attraction. Another significant outcome and push that we have in this strategy deals with business retention, expansion, and facilitation. Of course, building on the incredibly successful opening of the BEC recently, as well as the summit that was just held. Knowing that BR&E is a significant priority for this council. We were told very clearly that council wanted to make sure that BR&E was going to be prioritized as part of an economic development strategy, and making sure that we have the tools to be able to actually do that. I think one of the pieces that also is added into this strategy is making sure that the sufficient data and tools will be able to exist for us to be able to do things in a targeted fashion, in a strategic fashion, and to move away from historical preoccupation at times on anecdote driving certain strategies, and actually being able to demonstrate very clearly through our own internal data where it is that we need to be prioritizing our time, and help inform council's decisions around where that data can lead us into the future. And of course, lastly, it's around leveraging the partnerships that we know already exist. We have had plenty of conversations over the last number of years about the value of those partnerships, why those partnerships exist, as well as how those partnerships are able to improve the county's life and the opportunities for the county. The next phase of that, of course, is holding those partners honest to making sure that the county's interests are going to be met and realized, and simultaneously to make sure when those partners do have an opportunity, and a live opportunity that could be possibly placed here into the county or could be leveraged here in the county, that we are able to do the work here to fulfill the realization of those opportunities. So that's the high level reminder for council. I will do you the favor of not reading through the document, but of course I am happy to answer any questions about the strategy itself, any intended goals, outcomes, potential resourcing, or partner aligning as well.
Thank you very much for that. And I do appreciate not going through it word by word. We have just launched,
I'm told I have a very nice reading voice, your worship.
unless I have a different version of it. We've just launched our website for economic development. And one of the things that was shared with us is that will be where we keep the data and the information that we need. Are there other things, other steps, other ways that we should be using our data? When I look down to things like the advocacy, like how do we take what we've learned about hits and people looking at our website and people being interested and turn that, or can we then turn that into the next piece, which is, and here's the interest this is being generated?
Absolutely. I mean, the beautiful part about data, it will do as much or as little as you want it to do. And so the goal has been really since the middle of last year, a very intentional effort to make sure that with things like moving into the CRM system, like expanding into different scorecarding opportunities and database opportunities, it's not just going to be website analytics, it's going to be hard data that applies directly to the ongoing work of your economic development department. With that data, that data becomes the core of what we see those advocacy opportunities being, how we're able to reinforce those opportunities if we're talking to other orders of government, which is typically who we're going to be advocating to, or also with other municipalities. One of the challenges that we have faced to date is, again, a lot of it has been anecdotal. We know that we're not getting certain opportunities. Being able to track why that's the case is important. And also when we're talking about our value proposition, particularly with sophisticated investors, we need to be able to have the information at our fingertips where elected officials and staff can go into key meetings and be able to demonstrate quite clearly that not only do we have the competitive advantage, that we can quantify it. And that becomes incredibly important. And then also as a means of tracking progress on the plan, as council, it's going to make your lives a lot easier when you actually have hard data that staff is going to be able to bring to you to determine whether or not certain pieces are successful.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question? I have a few more. Certified site program.
Yep.
Great. Sounds great. I kind of think I know what that means. I'm hoping it means that there will be spots in our county that are actually ready. And if I'm calling from Abu Dhabi and this is what I want, we can say, yes, we have 3 sites for you because they've been certified and ready to go. That's how I see it, but that's pretty layman kind of farmer terms.
That's how I speak. So that's exactly what it means. What we want to be able to do is to have shovel-ready sites that if an investor calls us and says, I have $1 billion to spend, this is what I need, that we are able to put shovels in the ground as quickly as possible without having to go through the lag time of coming to council, knowing what servicing is going to cost to get to these different sites. And frankly, certified site programs and shovel-ready sites are a significant step in the right direction because we know that even within the region, the other counties are doing it. And we have to be able to not only have them ready, but have an inventory where we can provide a suite of potential sites to an investor to make sure that we're able to meet their needs, right? It isn't about our needs, it's about their needs. And we want to make sure that we have choice for them that demonstrates either geographically, service-wise, whatever it might be, that we are serious players and we want to land an investment.
And so that's all leading work. Is that leading work happening now? Like, do we have any certified sites yet? Do we have any that are close to being? I'm not sure if you're the one that can answer that, or Mr. Grayston or Mr. Coleman, but do we have any, or are we still working on?
Yeah, maybe I'll just make a quick comment around that. Obviously, we have a lot of vacancy here in Nisku. So we do collect the inventory of those sites. So we'll have some that'll have what I would call ready-made with limitations. We are bound by historical capacity in our water and sewer lines and our ability for roads to handle traffic volumes and turning radiuses and routes. But there are a listing of those being put together for within, I would call, old Nisku. The new Nisku, we basically, we're just about full. And we're working with developers to move on to the next best sites available. So yes, We do have it in I would say it's a little more ad hoc than maybe what you're dreaming it would be, but we will get there. And it will be available. I'll reiterate what I've told the team from the beginning. I plan on seeing Nisku filled in 7 years. So we are
Putting
going
that
to,
on our scorecard.
you can put that on a scorecard. Mr. Coleman already reminds me every week in my reviews. But that's where we want to go. That's what we want to do. The only way to do it is to implement this, and some of the other strategies in here are going to be really significant to moving ahead to address that.
Thank you. Any other, go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Just want to make a comment and an observation over the period that you've been putting this together, and again, presentations from businesses and surveys that we've had. Your priority 3, the business retention, expansion, and facilitation. One of the areas that has really kind of come full circle and struck me is your strategy to create a workforce development program. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we can do to actually rise above the land use in the area, somehow training people. I had mentioned before, getting the registered apprenticeship program in the schools in partnership, busing them out, but also opportunities. I'll just use Ukrainian immigrants coming in and maybe short-term housing, but also you have skilled tradespeople. And if we have that, if we can move forward, I see your goal is implementation by 2025. I'd like to see that accelerated into 2024, where some of the things, registered apprentice program, if I'm in school and I can get out here on a bus and work at a place and get my first year in, that would be excellent. Another one might be with the massive amount of hotel rooms that we have. I know Leduc Housing is using some of them right now. But if we had a workforce from around the world that could move in, we could offer that to employers, not only the land, and do that in an area. I think that would give us just something above everybody else. And maybe other municipalities are doing that, but that is the key, is people. On our survey, I think what surprised me the most is businesses said the lack of skilled and the lack of unskilled labor is their biggest challenge. So I hope, again, you have your priorities in, but that one I think would probably be maybe one of the most important ones of continuing, because the land is there. It's just a matter, can we also guarantee people that we will have trained people through maybe some efforts. And in the beginning, I didn't think it was a municipality's job to do that, but I'm starting to realize if we're going to move forward, we probably need to get more active in that area. So just a comment on, is it possible to accelerate that to give us further advantage to other areas in the region?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think what I would say is the only caution I would have around advancing the full development and execution of a program is that, to your point, Councillor, in the past, individual municipalities would rarely go about trying to advance these programs on their own. They're expensive, they are arduous, and they inherently require partnership in order for them to be executable and successful. So for us to branch into the first one, it isn't that we won't have workforce development opportunities between now and 25, but what we're saying is for the actual development of a full-fledged Leduc County specific workforce development program, we wanted to leave a little bit more time for us to maximize the opportunity for success. So for example, the key partners here are going to be post-secondaries, right? They are the holders of the talent. They're the holders of the training, and they're the holders of the data, frankly, that we need to be able to help fill our void. And so what we've seen in the announcements in the last while of the seed investment from Alberta Advanced Education towards trying to increase outputs on key areas that we know are going to benefit us here, that leg is still going to be something to get into a program, through a program, graduated through a program, for us to be able to see, to then return data to make sure that we're actually informing and plugging people into the right places. The other side of it is that we need businesses to be able to play ball to identify some of their gaps. So there is a survey component, there's a business engagement component to it, then there's the crafting of the actual program itself while partnering with Edmonton Global and the post-secondaries, and then actually developing and executing a program. So with your indulgence, what I would say would be, and my recommendation would be, that we will be advancing workforce development opportunities in the short term, and particularly, the example you use, for instance, on Ukrainian immigrants, if there is such an opportunity, we're able to do some plug and play. But the full-fledged program to be able to say that we have a program for the first time, I would say that my advice would be to walk before we run a little too fast, because we also, in an election year provincially, the flux that the post-secondaries are currently going through makes their ability to, well, their desire to, as a former post-secondary president, I'll just say it, they're not good at sharing. And so the hope is that we're going to be able to liaise with some of those partners to make our lives easier. And that's not just an Edmonton play. For the industries and sectors served here, there's other connectivity that has to take place. So for instance, in Red Deer Polytechnic as well, right? We want to be able to pull from graduates from multiple areas. That's going to take us a little bit of time.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Murray, when we're looking at the strategy around partnership with the EIA, it talks about transportation logistics. We know that EIA is continuing to pursue cargo movement. They did receive their large grant from the federal government last year for their new cargo apron. Is part of our strategy understanding what should occur on EIA property per se and what could happen outside, or is that something that's necessarily important to us as long as the cargo and the transportation logistics business lands here in our region? I mean,
for the taxes, we want the where matters for sure. But what I would say is this, is that the reason that we see transportation logistics as more of an enabling sector for the county is that the airport already has a significant amount of time and resource invested in this. We're not going to take the lead from them, or we will take the lead from them. We're not going to take it from. So I think the key for us is going to be understanding what that long-term vision for that play is, how we best complement it, and also how that dovetails into the service type sectors that the county already is able to lead with. And so until we're able to better understand some of those pieces, that's why it's identified as more an enabler than it is one of our actual focus sectors. Us going and investing time and resources into something when it already exists, frankly, just given our capacity, it would not be prudent. But the where definitely matters, Your Worship.
and again, we are working hard both with our work with Public Works at the airport and our new fire hall going there to ensure that the conditions to encourage more development there should be happening.
Absolutely.
Any further questions? I am seeing none.
Stunned silence. Stunned that they keep coming back.
Oh, I guess my last question was about partnering with other rural municipalities to be a bigger player for perhaps a bigger fish. I mean, that would be something that we could be looking at, be it Strathcona County or Wetaskiwin County or Parkland, that we, instead of looking at them as competitors, we would look at them as partners, potentially, depending on the business.
Always possible. I think what I would say is the beautiful part about the Edmonton global structure, I'm not even going to look at Councillor Smith, but the beautiful part about the Edmonton global structure is that it technically is supposed to be non-competitive. It's ultimately when a pitch is made to the region, the client or the investor makes the decision, right? And so where there's an opportunity where we may be able to leverage a partnership to enhance our own value proposition, of course, that's something that we would look to do. But even in the examples that you used, I would say that not all potential partners are made equal. And so the calculation has to be to make sure that we are not always a junior player in a pitch, because technically as the junior player, we will not have as much control over the pitch. And bringing others to the table can sometimes enhance the relative position of another partner that at some other point may compete with us. So those calculations have to be very carefully made and still within the prism of long-term regional prosperity balanced with self-interest.
So caution when you're hunting in a pack. Is that what you're saying?
I'm having flashbacks to the button.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions, my only questions. And again, echoing Councillor Smith's comments, from a council perspective, we really appreciate your wisdom and your experience and your intelligence on this, your push to make us put a strategy in place instead of just waiting for people or businesses to invest in our county, to actually start to think about, and who do we want and where do we want them and how do we want them to be investing. This is our first step into that. And it's pretty exciting. And I think we're going to, in a couple of years, see some real benefits from this. So thank you for that. I am looking for someone to move the motion. Thank you. Councillor Balazer moves that we approve Leduc County investment strategy. Any other questions? Oh, yep.
When we're looking at this, we look at the, if you're looking at inventory for, we look at the other municipalities in the county, the stores, things, the Walker, Chalmer. We want to work that in, like something that'll be, it's not going to be the big multi-billion dollar, a lot of money. We keep those municipalities in our mind in this strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the goal, of course, would be that what's good for them is ultimately going to be good for us in some way, shape, or form. And so certainly those partnerships will be integral. I think what you'll see in this plan is step one is really getting our own backyard in order, and that would be a significant component of that.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
I'll be supporting the motion today. Thank you again for actually giving us a strategy that as a council, we can stand behind. We can see the outcomes as you move through and dates. So it's really matured over a period of time to just, answering the phone and hoping to something I think that is an exceptional and a broad-based approach to go forward. So I look forward to things coming on as you move through it. Thank you for that.
Going to call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you again for your time today.
My pleasure, folks.
On to Mr. Honesty and Mr. Moffat. You might as well both come forward. Come on, Nicholas. Don't be shy. And we're starting with the Village of Warburg Arena Funding Agreement. Mr. Honesty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The recommendation is a continuation of our support to the Village of Warburg in the redevelopment of their arena. In a few years ago, we supported phase one, which was new dressing rooms, and that project has been successfully completed and is well received by the community. Last fall, council gave some support towards the village submitting a grant application to the province in support of phase two, which included a new ice plant and Zamboni room and facility storage. The village was successful in receiving a $1 million grant from the province, which is a significant grant for a community of that size. And since then, we have been working closely with the village to prepare a timeline and a project scope for that phase two project. We are working with them, and the plan is to complete a selection process this fall. With some of these components, it's a 6 to 8 month delivery. So by making our commitment now, our hopes is to select a vendor and make those orders this fall, which will allow for a spring, summer completion of the project. Some of the project is actually being intended to be completed this summer, but the village will use grant funds, so there'll be no requirement for Leduc County to make a contribution this summer. The reason for that is to reduce the risk of any repairs or breakdowns that may occur over this next operating season. So it's just timely to get them done this summer. Once a construction vendor has been selected, we anticipate a spring startup and be ready for the fall operating season in 2024. Our recommendation is to allow administration to enter into an agreement with the village. And through that agreement, we'll understand the scope of the project and the administrative authorities and directions between the village and the county. Obviously, with a significant commitment, the county has a strong voice to play in that project and any scope changes. The one I wanted to identify for council is I've supported a slight change to the original scope of the project. Currently, there's 2 ice plants, one for the curling rink and one for the arena. We've identified that there are a significant amount of efficiencies around scoping the new ice rink or the ice plant to be suitable and compatible to run both facilities going forward. And that'll reduce any required replacement and will reduce the annual operating costs for the curling rink as well. So it's anticipated to be a minor change to the scope of work, but will have significant savings for us in the future. So with that, we have a recommendation to authorize administration to enter into a funding agreement with the Village of Warburg for phase 2 arena renovations and the county contribution up to $1.1 million, with the funds to be allocated in the 2024 budget. So the way the agreement will be written, that we will not make a payment until 2024, and the village is aware of that and understanding of that, which will allow us to effectively budget for it for 2024.
Thank you. Councillor Balazer.
Yeah, comments, Dean. I was yesterday sat down with management at Sunnybrook Welding, and this subject came up, and they were just so extremely pleased that we are, as a county, working out with Warburg and doing this. One of the managers there actually has kids that attends Warburg figure skating and says that they're so pleased with what we're doing. So with that, I would certainly make this recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Balazer puts his name to the recommendation. And then I have Councillor Smith and Councillor Lewis.
I'll definitely be supporting the motion today. However, I need assurances that I'm just looking at some of the stuff you hear, that county administration will participate in all project meetings with the funding agreement to include county involvement. This is a lot of money, and we're more than just a financial contributor. So I would want to ensure from you today that the agreement will have in writing Leduc County's access to the project as a fair and equal partner, not just as a funder.
Correct. And we've been involved in the meetings. Phase 1 was a good example of that, where we're involved in all the meetings, as well as our formal sign off on any scope changes for sure, but also any adjustments to the project timelines. The agreement will ensure that we have that formal authorization and sign off.
Okay, Councillor Smith. Sorry, Councillor Lewis.
That's twice today.
Yes,
It's
he
okay.
gets to speak twice.
Has Warburg received this money already? There's been a couple times where there's been stuff announced, not to Warburg, but other municipalities, and they've just been delayed. So they already have the funds and we are good to go.
Correct. And actually, and we've supported them as well, is because most of the funds aren't needed immediately. They've invested those funds, which will allow some interest to be accrued until we need it. So, which will benefit both municipalities.
Any further comments or questions? Good news story for recreation in our county. Going to call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. On to 5D2, which is recreation cost share capital, City of Leduc.
Thank you. As council is aware, we have a recreation cost share agreement with the City of Leduc. Through our agreement, we have a set amount for operating support on a 3-year agreement that we recently just signed with the city. Through that is also a commitment to support our capital contributions. The way the structure is set up is that we will commit to the projects in the current year, and then we'll make a payment towards those projects the following year once we've seen their year-end financial statements. The city has submitted their 2022 financials, and we have reviewed them and recommended them for support. You will see there are a significant amount of variances from what was budgeted. Some are complete, and then some will be carried forward into 2023. And we're working with their administration to account for that and to recognize that some of those delays were just due to ordering and supplies and delays with contracts. So we're working with the city to understand those and to make sure we properly plan for those in 2023, which will contribute to them in 2024. So that the city summary is provided for you, and our contribution to that, as per the agreement, would be 38,725.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Honesty on the report? I'm seeing none. Just a comment, when we met with the committee, sorry, as a committee, certainly there were no issues with the removal of the ones that we had suggested that are in the report, and easy to work with to get to that number. Okay, no question. Looking for someone to put the recommendation. Your name. Thank you, Councillor Scobie. If you could just read it in, if you got her there in front of you. Glasses on. Good job. And your microphone, both your glasses and your microphone.
Okay, there we go. I'll move the recommendation that Leduc County Council support the 2022 capital program as submitted by the city of Leduc and a funding contribution of $38,725.
Thank you. I am seeing no further hands up for debate or questions, so I will call the question. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Moffat, we are on to some policies, I believe.
You betcha. So we have two policies today. First one being Lakeshore Reserve Management Policy MR-02. And our recommendation is that County Council approve the policy. A little background. So on March 23rd, we brought this policy to the Policy Review Committee, who then reviewed it and recommended to refer to Council for approval. This policy, first created back in 2006 in February, Council approved this policy to address and improve the use of Leduc County lakeshore lands. This policy is fundamental in changing how we provide guidance to our lakeshore users, and it previously did not exist. In the years to follow, administration has worked with residents to clean up the shoreline, become compliant with the new policy, and set a standard and guidelines that residents can understand and follow. The overall intent of this updated policy was to allow residents to access the lake for personal use while respecting that it is county land and that we must work together to protect and preserve the shoreline and overall health of our lakes. This policy has been effective in achieving these goals, and the new proposed policy has been updated, improved, and simplified, but continues to maintain the intent and direction from 2006. We also continue to work closely with residents on both Wizard and Pigeon Lake and continue our support and partner with both of those associations. So I won't go through the details of the policy today, but there's basically 5 main areas that the policy hits on. And so one, that's general lakeshore reserve use, and that we want everybody to use the reserve lands for their designated purposes only. We want to allow public access. We want to prohibit any structures on lakeshore reserves that were not put in there by ourselves. We want to manage temporary piers and boat lifts and the storage of those units. And then we also want to restrict and set clear responsibilities around vegetation removal of those land that happens on those lands. Other than that, the policy is very similar to how it was before, but like I said, we simplified it and made it clear.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie, Chair of Policy, anything else we should know about?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. It just brings it up current and makes it clear as to what can be done and can't be done on municipal reserves and or county lands. So it just brings it up to date and makes it very straightforward as to what can be done and can't be done.
Thank you. I am looking at the map on page 53 of 78 in our package, and it's from Mission Beach and Pigeon Lake, and it says Lakeshore Reserve Lands. Do I assume it's that whole yellow area along there? Is that correct?
That is correct. So Mission Beach, we own all of the lands that are along the lakeshore on the lake side of the roadway.
So, and that's where in the past, people who perhaps who've lived on the other side of the road have sort of claimed the area across the road, but parallel to their property as kind of their own. Is that kind of what's happened over time?
That is very much what happened. Yeah. So Mission Beach is the easiest because the county owns the entirety of that land. When you go to other areas such as Moonlight Bay on the next page, we
Yes.
own sections. And so the rules are obviously different for private property versus county-owned lakeshore lands. So that's where it brings in the issues, because obviously we are managing our land to a certain standard and the land use bylaw manages the private lands. So
And so, Mr. Moffat, if I'm looking at figure 2, right now it says Moonlight Bay, where we have lakeshore reserve lands, are those, is there signage that says these are reserve lands?
you bet. So we have municipal reserve signs on posts and they're dotted along there. And typically the residents know which lands are ours and which ones are private. So
All right, but again, you can see how it could become confusing and over
Absolutely.
time if it's not been managed. All right, any other, I have Counselor Smith and then Velazquez.
Really just an extension to the mayor's questioning, I guess. Is it a big issue, and are you dealing with a lot of compliance and clear trees being cleared currently? And what you have here, does that give you the tools to better manage it if there is a problem there? So if you can give me just a quick update of how big the problem is there clearing? Are there a lot of docks that shouldn't be there? And do you get the tools with the new policy?
And I think the tools were set in place in 2006 with the original policy. I think there was an issue at that time, but since then we've worked fairly effectively with the residents to protect and preserve yet use that area. So, as the mayor suggested, they claim that area, but the policy allows it to be clearly defined on what they can or cannot do on that area. Claim it as your own, which is great. We own it, but you want them to feel the ownership of it. But here are the rules of how and what you can do on that land. So I think the effective tool happened in 2006, and this is just an extension and a reclassification of how we have that policy.
Counselor Blaser?
Yeah, I was just going to say further to that, we know Mission Beach has not been a problem, but you go down along Moonlight Bay, and why all of a sudden do we just own some and not the other? And how far back does this go and what's the reasoning?
So that's
And I got you on that one, didn't I?
well, no, that would have been a development decision back in the day. So when this was developed out and subdivided out, those were the decisions that were made, and that we wouldn't take all of those lands. So
Further to that, it as recently it has created issues, and I thank you guys for working through them. It's been a problem at times.
Thank you. Okay, Counselor Birdie.
Yeah, just further to that, are those subdivided pieces? Like, is that titled land, those little chunks?
yeah,
Separate titles?
separate titles.
Any caveat for Leduc County on those? Like, I'm just trying to wonder if we can get it back somehow through a caveat or something.
No, those are on title.
Mr. Grayston, go ahead.
Yeah, each of those, basically what happens in those incidents is that title extends right out into it shows it in the water, but it's all under a title. They're not they're not a part A, part B or anything of that nature that I'm aware of. And it's historical going back to probably into the 60s, when maybe even the 50s when they first started.
But it looks like we have a policy with clean and easy language. Would this be like one of our outward facing policies? So if I'm buying a spot on Moonlight Bay, I'd be able to take a look and see if I'm across the road or not.
Yeah, we
Know
do.
what I can and can't do on that piece of property.
And we do multiple ways of engaging the residents in those areas. Some, we have a taxpayer association that we work closely with. So if there's a new resident, they'll actually deliver some of our
Okay.
materials. And we've supported the Mission Beach group in a booklet that they have, which all the updated information has been sent out. And then Nicholas also sends an annual letter, because it's important that every year that's a friendly little reminder of policies or the different work that we do along the lakeshore, even our partnerships with the watershed. All those reminders are within there just to clarify for residents what they can or cannot do in those areas.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I'll be happy to move that policy. I think that good, strong policies help to create clarity, not only for our residents, but also for administration. So I will move that Leduc County Council approve policy MR-02 Lakeshore Reserve Management. Any further debate? I'm seeing no hand. Oh, all in favor? That's unanimous. On to 5D4, temporary seasonal dock authorization policy. Mr. Moffat or Mr. Honesty, I don't know which one of you.
It will be me once again, and thank you, Madam Mayor. So again, on March 23rd, we brought this policy forward to the Policy Review Committee, which recommended to refer this to Council for approval. Some background is that in September of 2020, the Alberta government imposed the disturbance standard for temporary docks and other mooring structures for personal recreational purposes. The purpose of this standard is to set the maximum acceptable footprint for temporary seasonal docks, boat lifts, and associated structures for personal recreational purposes on public land. So landowners that don't own waterfront property are required to obtain permission from the municipality to support their application for an authorization to place a dock. In order for the municipality to provide these letters of permission, we are obligated to understand and administer the disturbance standards. This proposed policy will provide a mechanism for administration to provide permission for those that wish to receive a permit from the province. This policy will apply to approximately 100 current dock users in Leduc County. And although we don't foresee all residents requesting permission, in that there is no intent from administration to identify or require permits from dock owners, simply to provide an opportunity for those that wish to do so. By having a policy in place, we will be able to support Leduc County residents that wish to be compliant with provincial standards and approvals. All approval processes will be administered and tracked through Parks and Recreation Department, and we will continue to improve our efforts and communications with lakeshore communities to understand and improve the current practices. So for the policy that you have in front of you today, essentially, Leduc County supports the ability for residents to place temporary seasonal docks and boat lifts along our lakeshore reserves where appropriate. So we want to provide that access for our residents. This policy is a guide to assist those individuals classified as backlot landowners in obtaining permission from Leduc County. Permission is required in order to apply to Alberta Environment and Parks for authorizations to place their docks, boat lifts, and platforms. So the important definition here is that backlot landowners. So those are people who do not share a property boundary with a waterway or a municipal reserve, and thus do not fall under the definitions of waterfront or semi-waterfront holder. So if you refer to the figure 1 that was in my last policy, so in Mission Beach, all of the residents in Mission Beach are technically backlot landowners. So this is our largest subdivision that this policy applies to. So for those that wish to be compliant with the province, we wanted to create a process and a policy for them to follow that sets out basically what they have to do to come to us to get their permission. So number 1, so the options for backlot owners. So co-owning a dock with a waterfront or semi-waterfront landowner. They can establish a shared use agreement with a waterfront or semi-waterfront landowner. They can become an approved user of an authorized community dock owned by the local municipality or association. Or D, they can obtain a separate authorization from Alberta Environment and Parks. And it's that option D that involves the county. So where they require municipal consent for dock, boat lift, and platform authorizations, we would basically create the following conditions. So a landowner needs to reside within the subdivision of which they are attempting to secure access adjacent to a municipal reserve. The location within the subdivision does not create disputes or is an area of common interest. It does not impede community access or public areas, and it verifies compliance with the disturbance standard. So this lakeshore use would, approved dock authorizations will comply with the requirements outlined in policy MR-02 Lakeshore Reserve Management Policy. And approved authorizations are not for the applicant's access to their seasonal dock, boat lifts, and swim platforms. Authorization does not give unrestricted access to the lands for the applicants, nor does it restrict access to others. Reserved lands are for public use and enjoyment. So essentially, this just sets out the process for those that wish to get that authorization to come to Leduc County and for us to administer that.
Okay, thank you. And again, it's the province who provides the permit.
Yep.
Okay, just before I take you, Councillor Balazar, anything else from policy committee? Councillor,
I think that pretty much covers it. This just cleans it up and gives backlot owners the conditions that they can operate from and gives them permission to go to the government of Alberta to get their permit for a dock. So they know our conditions and they have the lane to get to the Alberta environment and get their dock permit.
thank you. Councillor Balazar.
Yeah, last year, I know this was brought up at some of the meetings at the lake, insurance. Who's liable if somebody gets hurt, or do they have to carry their own insurance or liability? Where is that falling?
So insurance, so are we talking about getting hurt on their own docks?
Well, say if somebody fell on their dock and got hurt and they decided to sue, could they sue us?
So this is only us granting permission for them to place their docks off of our property. So it doesn't include the use of their docks or anything like that, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering where liability falls if, say if somebody got hurt.
So access to the water to put their dock is all a letter
That's
for
all
them
we're
to
doing.
go to the province that says we'll give them access across our land to put in their dock in the water.
Correct.
Okay, Councillor Mr. Coleman.
Madam Chair, just to clarify on the being sued piece, arguably the municipality's named in a lawsuit and then lawyers and judges decide where the liability rests. This doesn't add any liability to us and it doesn't really decrease any liability for us either. It's just a process to support those that want to proceed with the permitting process.
Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. When this policy is placed on the county website, will it also have the link for the Alberta government's information?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I see no more questions. Looking for someone to make the motion. Councillor Scobie. And we just need your microphone once you find it.
There we go. Okay, make the motion that Leduc County Council approve policy MR01, temporary seasonal dock authorization.
Thank you. Okay, motions on the floor for the policy. I am seeing no further questions, so I will call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Good luck with that. Will those be posted directly now? Both of those policies? Will both of those policies be posted directly because we are getting into boat season?
Yes.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to adjourn our meeting at 2:48 p.m. Thank you very much for all of those who joined us.